There are two places in my life where I was being trained and told to never say no, like in the same similar kind of way.
I don't love it.
No, I know. Looking back, one was Starbucks.
Okay.
You're supposed to always reply with like what you can do, not what you can't do.
Sure.
So it's like, and the other was the training for volunteers at the mega church. Like, how do you, when visitors come in and ask for something, never say, So there you go. Do with that what you will.
I will. Welcome to Cult Favorite, the podcast that never loses a box of keys to $2 million worth of houses. Podcast without influencers. We're a brand. There are really so many options today.
We should do them all. Do them all.
Podcast without influencers or a brand. The podcast that will offer caution before you go hang with wild pigs, which I think is always a good, rule of thumb. That will never relegate you to a FEMA tent. Is that it? I don't know.
Yeah.
It will never serve you a cheese sandwich.
The cheese sandwich. That's probably the most iconic.
It's the internet photo that launched 1,000 memes. I'm Miranda Simmons.
And I'm Mike Altman. I wonder, all right, everyone stop. If you're watching this, listening to this. Okay. Now guess based on that what we're talking about today. Write it down on a piece of paper. Hold it up.
Sure.
Put it to the side. Okay, now. All right.
I feel like this is a good way to kick off our summer.
Yeah.
Our little micro summer series of conversations.
Yeah.
When we're not teaching, we're still doing work. We're engaged in projects.
You're doing work. I'm trying. I don't know. We'll see.
You are. And we are talking about Fyre fraud.
Yes.
From Hulu 2019. And I am very, very excited to have this conversation.
I need to do the catchphrase real quick. I'm Mike Altman. I think I might have said it. And we're two religious studies professors trying to understand all of these cult documentaries that you can't stop binge watching.
And while this is not a cult documentary per se,
yes,
I think it follows a very similar arc and it has some similar themes that we'll discuss. And it's made by
Julia Nason,
who made
Lula Rich and Shiny Happy People,
both of which we have discussed. Yeah. So now we are.
Somebody email her and tell her about our show.
I was just going to say, like, we're completing the set.
I want her to be our first guest at this point.
We keep talking about having guests, but then you and I have too much to say to each other. And so we never end up making time for a guest. Yeah. But I think that would be useful. Tell me what you knew about the Fyre Festival.
I remember this story sort of as it unfolded on Twitter, because I was very on Twitter.
This was 2016.
2016. I was on Twitter a lot for various reasons.
The platform formerly known as Twitter.
Yeah, well, it was Twitter then. So it was Twitter, yeah. But yeah, this was nearing, it was kind of, honestly, I was thinking about the history of Twitter and how this is kind of one of the last great Twitter moments before it got worse and worse and worse. And so I was watching it real time as it developed, and then I've seen both this documentary. I watched it when it first came out, and the Netflix one.
They both came out. They came out within 4 days of each other.
And there's a nice little shot taken. At this. This
one had like a rush release, no promo, because they were trying to get it out right before.
Yeah.
They knew that the Netflix.
Well, it doesn't really need promo because all the promo happened already. People already knew about it, right?
Promo was the rise and the fall
of then
the Fyre Festival.
And then also in 2019, All Elite Wrestling, my favorite national wrestling brand, did a show called Fyter Fest.
Fyter Fest.
Fyter, with a logo that looked like the Fyre Festival logo.
Got it.
As one of this was before they got their TV deal started. So they were doing a series of kind of one-off shows. And one of them was called Fyre, which they still do every summer. But they were sort of hopping on
with
the Fyter Fest. So yeah.
I also kicked off my summer by watching the second season of Secret Lives of Mormon Wives,
Yeah.
which I always have to say very slowly to get it right. And that is, I don't know, thanks or I don't know whether to credit or blame you for my decision. I know.
This is.
I just, as we're about to talk about influencers and media culture.
I did see there's a new member of Mom Talk. That's all I know.
Well, I'll fill you in later.
Okay. Is Mom Talk going to survive
They're voting now on who gets to be in and out. There's the insider outsider politics are immersive. Really,
we may have to revisit this because now the Mormon wives are institutionalizing.
Okay. So not unlike influencer culture in general.
Yes.
Fyre Festival completely missed me. And I think that this is maybe, so I was talking with a friend recently about, because we're born, like pretty close to each other. And she relates much more, thinks of herself as a millennial.
Right.
And I have always resonated with the stereotypes or just generalizations about Gen X a little more.
Yeah.
And the best thing we were able to, like our working theory, best thing we were able to come up with for the reason for that is that she grew up very much with technology in the household.
Yeah.
And I did not. And so I am so much a Zennial. I'm very much in the lane. I was like, I was born right in between. Like, I think that the Zennials are like 79 to 83 or something. And this is very much so the Fyre Festival and Twitter, I feel like is a very millennial phenomenon, which this documentary really goes into.
It is very much about millennials. Yeah.
And so while I get it, I didn't get it. I had no
here's
conception
the question.
that this thing even happened. It completely missed me.
Oh, wow. You didn't even know.
No, I had no idea. Until and I guess I wasn't watching late night at the time. I don't know. I don't know. There were things happening.
I don't think millennials watch late night.
I just I wasn't on Twitter much.
Did you play Oregon Trail as a child? You did?
Yeah.
Okay.
A little bit. I didn't know what it was.
There's an alternative theory of
I played Frogger
of the Oregon,
on the Commodore 64.
The Oregon Trail generation. That is that same gap between because Billy McFarland, it was like 33.
He's the founder of the Fyre.
He's 33
Festival.
now.
Correct.
So
he is a literal decade younger than I am.
Right.
And so I just I don't know, man.
I don't feel like I didn't that's what I think. Yeah, I think that's interesting because I think they said in the documentary they say millennials are 80 to 95 or something like that.
Technically, right? But so I'm just right there in the cusp.
I like the phrase geriatric millennial to describe this. Or elder millennial.
No, I like Zennial better.
Zennial. Yeah.
But I was in my mid-30s when the Fyre Festival occurred, and it didn't exist for me.
I think I feel closer to it because I'll turn 41 in like 2 weeks. So or a month.
So while I knew nothing about the Fyre Festival, here's the context very quickly, because you touched on this a second ago. We watched, and we're about to talk about Hulu's documentary, Fyre Fraud, that had a rush release 4 days before the Netflix documentary, which is just called Fyre, The Greatest Party That Never Happened. I watched the Netflix documentary first, just in the, realm of documentary watching.
Yeah.
I wanted, as is my way, some more structural analysis. So I watched this Hulu documentary. I enjoyed it. I appreciated the discussions of generational context and wealth acquisition and identity formation and how those things work together. We get a lot more information about specific investors and business ventures and partners like Fuck Cherry Media. Did you know who that was?
I did, because I've seen them on Instagram.
Because I was like, that name sounds familiar. Yeah. But I also didn't really know anything about Fuck Cherry.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'd run into them, but that's all
they play a really important part in this story, arguably, depending on your perspective. And at the very end of the Hulu documentary, we learn that the Netflix documentary was in fact co-produced by Vice and Fuck Cherry Media.
There you go.
So it makes sense that the Netflix documentary is much more like we do hear from the CEO of Fuck Cherry in the Netflix documentary.
Okay.
But it is much more. Have you seen it?
I saw it when it came out.
Oh,
so
that's
I haven't seen it in 6 years.
It's much more just a kind of like blanket description of like what went wrong with the festival and what a tool Billy McFarland is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where but it does have more to say about like what actually happened to Bahamian local workers.
On the Netflix one.
Yes. And that was more or less missing from the Hulu documentary, which I did think was a bummer. I think that's an important story to tell as well. So what gets covered in this documentary, in the Hulu one, is the story of the ill-fated Fyre Festival. And if you are, like me, someone who missed the Fyre Festival completely, just as a product of pop culture, we will tell you the summary in just a second. But this was the brainchild of very squarely millennial entrepreneur Billy McFarland, and not millennial rapper Ja Rule, who I very much did know. Because he is closer to my age than Billy McFarland is. Yeah. So it's about the power of marketing to sell an idea. It's about the deceitful lengths that someone can go to in the name of making money. And it's about the generational zeitgeist that made it all possible. Like I said, what doesn't get covered is like the fallout for Bahamian workers, because the Fyre Festival happened on one of the islands in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
And so these people were really exploited in the process, not very appreciated, very much still waiting on debts that they are owed.
Yeah.
And the Hulu documentary does say that they're owed thousands that still haven't been paid. And we get a little bit on the front end from a reporter that talks about how like Billy McFarland, this kind of situation is not special or unique, that the Bahamas have like the proximity and visibility make that space what she calls a first stop shop for scammers.
Yeah.
So
and the idea that like you kind of there's a specific sort of system and game that has to be played to do stuff in the Bahamas that you can't just like drop into.
For sure.
Yeah.
But what ends up happening, but there is also a context there where you have these like high-end resorts juxtaposed with poverty, and like the way that those two things live in relation to one another means that there's a lot of like pay for play and kickbacks and stuff.
Yeah.
So the festival was supposed to be a promotional event for the Fyre app.
Yeah.
This is what Billy McFarland and Ja Rule created. It was like a talent. Well, Ja Rule didn't create it. He was kind of like the brand ambassador.
Yeah.
He didn't have a title technically, but he was very much one of the, like a primary face of the Fyre app, which was supposed to be it was launched as like a talent booking app.
Yeah.
So you could go through, instead of having to like, it kind of cuts out the middlemen. You're able to go on there and say, I would like, whoever to like come to my glitzy birthday party because I have loads of money. And so I can, it's been described as like Tinder or Uber or one of those kinds of apps, but for talent.
Yeah.
So this was going to be a super exclusive music festival in the Bahamas. It was promoted through a very flashy commercial that the Netflix documentary spends lots of time on.
And how they made it and everything.
Oh, man. And that commercial like sees models playing with like pigs on the beach and swimming in the open water with sharks and like feeding beer to the pigs and petting them and stuff. But it's a good time. It's gonna be the best time.
Drunk pig does not.
It's gonna be the best time though, Mike.
I want to mess with
the best time because beautiful people are going to be there.
Yeah,
they're going to be wearing practically nothing. There's going to be sand. There's going to be so much booze, and it's going to be the music festival event of whatever.
Of whatever.
It's going to say the decade. No,
of the decade.
Of the generation, of the century, of the, it was, they also had a really flashy social media campaign enlisting Fuck Jerry to help them do it. And they had influencers like Kendall Jenner posting about it. Kendall Jenner is also someone that apparently has like 99 million followers on social media.
Yeah.
I really don't know. I know who Kendall
Right.
is.
Yeah.
Right. So there are lots of
there's these people.
There are lots of cultural touchstones in this documentary that I'm like, oh, okay.
Right. There's a number of people in the world who are famous and I don't know why.
Well,
and I'm like constantly like Wikipedia, like why is this? But
this is how influencers work. They are famous for being famous.
That's right.
And then there's a brand that is created around someone's identity. So we meet two. So the documentary splits it up into like, there are these macro influencers like Jenner who get paid like literally $250,000 for one post.
That's great.
Good gig if you can get it. But who are also celebrities in their own rights because they're a model or whatever. Then there are influencers that we meet two of them who went to the Fyre Festival who do not have 99 million followers, but who have
plenty. Yeah.
Multiple tens of thousands or whatever, who are influencing people and getting lots of follows and clicks because they have an identity brand. And when they are asked to talk about this, I loved this part.
Oh,
do you remember?
Yes. Oh, I love this. Yes.
What did they say?
They
tell me about your brand.
And it was, I don't remember. What did they say?
It was like
it's my life. Positivity. Yes. Okay. Yeah.
This was the connective tissue between the two of them.
Positivity.
They both said positivity.
That's a good brand.
When they asked for more follow-up, there wasn't a lot of there. At least in the editing of the product. Maybe they had loads to say and it was clipped. I do not know, but this is so there was a lot of social media buzz. There was an orange tile stopper. I learned that word. It's a little vocabulary word for me about this. Because like we're scrolling all the time on our phones.
Yeah.
And so you need something to stop you in your tracks. And Fyre Fest had,
if you've seen our logo, you can see that I've learned this.
Oh my God. Had just an orange tile. And so when you click on that, you see the commercial.
Yeah.
Anyway, but they tried to do it in 5 months. And
that's what I couldn't figure out.
That's what you couldn't figure out?
Well, I just don't know
30 things.
Why it had to be done in 5 months.
Because if you've got a lot of money, at least is the way that this story lands. So
it's because it never was actually going to happen. Maybe.
I think it was, at least how it landed for me was like, if you've got enough money, you can just make stuff happen.
If I can make like Kylie Jenner.
It's not because you don't have to think about the work that goes into it because you pay for it.
Right.
And if you pay for it, like if you order something through Amazon Prime, it just appears on your doorstep.
Yeah.
And you don't have to think about
that line. We can't just Amazon Prime a villa.
And so there was this idea that it was just possible. And so I don't know the intentions or the extent to which good and bad faith was operating in the mind of Billy McFarland about what was or wasn't possible. But they tried to do it in 5 months rather than like 12 to 18, which is typically, kind of the rule of thumb minimum for planning something this big. They shoot the video on Norman's Cay. It's part of the promotion that it's like, this is the island that was owned by Pablo Escobar, which has its own problems in so many ways, on so many levels. But then it was like, no, you can't just do this on this island. They go island shopping. They decide to do it on Great Exuma. There is a little bit of infrastructure on Great Exuma. There's like a hotel and stuff, but they decide to do it on the same weekend. This was another question.
Yeah.
Like, why not just say, okay, we'll do the next weekend? I don't know. But they decided to do it on the same weekend where there's this big sailing event happening. One of the locals describes it as bigger than Christmas. And so there's not going to be the hotel rooms or the cars or there's just not going to happen. So the team starts selling, though, these like literally $250,000 villa packages for this super exclusive event. But the villas don't exist. The packages don't exist. They're selling an idea and they are marketing the idea. And you can take real money for an idea that is not yet real.
One of the line that I wrote down, perfectly generic Fantasia.
Yes.
I love it. I love it.
Yes. They are selling promises that they cannot deliver on to pay other people. So like, I'm going to sell you a villa package so that I can take your money and pay my production team.
Right.
But I'm promising them something that then so it becomes this cycle. Enter wire fraud and securing services and loans with doctored financial and transfer documents. This is how Billy gets an investor at one point to give him $800,000 and so on. But this is still not enough money. There's still not enough infrastructure. Headliners are not getting paid, and so they drop out. People
I remember when Blink-182 dropped out. Like, I remember seeing that happen on Twitter.
Blink-182.
Oh, this is interesting. Because I actually like Blink-182. So I was like that was in my network of people I follow.
I'm not a fan of Blink-182, but I do have, this is one of the, I was just like drop little like crumbs of like things that I was just, that was the only act whose name I knew. There were other ones.
You didn't know Major Lazer?
I did not know Major Lazer.
I knew Major Lazer.
Ugh. So,
yeah.
Anyway, people, meanwhile, who have bought packages to this event are starting to ask logistical questions online because they have not received anything in the way of like flight information. They're promised private jets and all like, yacht experiences, et cetera, et cetera. They're not getting information about this. So they're starting to ask logistical questions, as one might, and they get blocked from social media. And so everything is just part of this, like, yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out ethos. And there's all of this momentum that's already behind it. And so people just keep going with it. Fuck Jerry keeps promoting it to the end. They're not paying duty fees. I did not know that there was a 45% tax on booze. That's a lot. Man. And they wanted $2 million. They bought $2 million worth of booze, which is a lot of booze, but that's also a lot of tax. They're also not paying national insurance. And so job sites that they are trying to create at the last minute are getting shut down because so there's just not any thought to how to do this and make it like a real thing outside of the idea that is so good. So venture capitalist Calvin Wells comes into play here. He is in both documentaries and is interviewed heavily for both. So he's kind of the I don't know, the one in both, but it makes sense because he starts calling them out and he's the one who creates the now infamous Fyre fraud Twitter account.
He's the Kristen Dumais of fraud.
I don't know what that means. Like, I mean, I know who Kristen Dumais is.
Yeah, well, because she keeps showing up in all the evangelical documentaries. Like, he's the fraud. Like, he's the one they bring in.
Got it. So, so he creates this Twitter account to start calling them out and saying, like, this isn't making sense, you guys. Wall Street Journal publishes the information that he gives to them. But the festival is largely unfazed, man, because they've got a piece in Vogue and they've got like press releases that are just putting out all of this positive spin. So people start arriving. The festival is here. A mere 5 months after they release the commercial. There's a huge storm the night before they begin arriving. And so they arrive not seeing villas, but instead disaster relief tents and wet mattresses and dirty water and no organization. So The private jet is actually a crowded plane. VIP transport is actually like a school bus going over a bumpy road. The first class security is actually like a set of standalone lockers, and then there's that infamous photo of a cheese sandwich that begins to just now, all of these influencers who are down there and just rich people about town who are down there start posting all of these things about like, look at my luxury villa and it's, this gross tent. Anyway, and the internet responds with gleeful schadenfreude because, people are like delighting in the face of these millennials that are miserable. So, late night has a field day with it. There's a law firm. We hear from one of the lawyers at Garagos and Garagos that begins a $100 million class action lawsuit. We learn in the kind of narrative text at the end that all sorts of people who do not take accountability are named in the lawsuit. So they are like Ja Rule is a defendant who's named. Fuck Jerry is identified in the lawsuit. Billy's like right-hand man and VP of marketing, Grant Margolin. He is named.
He seemed like quite the guy.
He's a character. Meanwhile, Billy gets charged with wire fraud by the FBI. One of the quotes that is given from their document is McFarland's fraud was a deliberate plan to deceive, motivated by unadulterated greed. He caused losses to at least 80 victim investors, totaling more than $24 million. So he gets out on bail. But while he's out on bail, he launches another scam.
Yes.
This time they're all in the same kind of like zip code of offerings. This is NYC VIP access, and they're selling tickets that do not exist to exclusive events like the Met Gala and Hamilton. They sold tickets to Hamilton. This was in his earlier credit card company. We can talk about that later. Anyway, he's selling tickets that are impossible to get.
Yeah.
Promising things that
the Victoria's
cannot
Secret,
be offered.
Fashion
Victoria's
show.
Secret fashion show was the one. His bail is
selling
revoked.
a dream though, Miranda.
He's
selling that
100%.
you can be on the other side of the camera.
That's correct. He's sentenced to 6 years in federal prison and is slapped with a fine of, a little north of $26 million. And that's what that's what gets covered. I mean, there's a lot of context that we'll talk about, but I was trying to like nutshell this. That's the narrative arc.
What do
you want to talk about?
Okay. So I mean, we'll pick up where you kind of left off. Like what was interesting to me is the power of exclusivity in this whole thing. Like in some ways, if you're not someone for whom like having an exclusive experience is valuable, then this totally doesn't make any sense, right? But it was built on this idea of like you're getting into doing something that no one else gets to do. And I think it's really interesting how powerful that was.
Yeah.
I don't know to what extent that is still a dominant paradigm or not. Like maybe I don't know if I've aged out of it. Like I definitely like the whole part on millennials and that kind of FOMO and all that.
They talk about FOMO as a phenomenon.
Yeah. Yes. Like that totally.
Tell us what FOMO stands for.
Fear of missing out.
Yeah.
And I feel like that was totally rang true to me and my experience. But I think and that kind of comparativism that drives the whole thing.
Yep.
But I don't know if that is still like the Fyre Fest may have been. I wonder if it was at the beginning of a larger cultural trend, like away from that, where we kind of realize like all of it's Fyre Fest. I don't,
I think that at least for me, what rings true is when you said like that it's possible to age out of it.
Yeah.
Like I think that there is always an impulse, like we want to feel included and connected, but the extent to which that inclusion is a constitutive and primary part of our own identity. That seems like a thing that lives at a certain time of people's life. I mean, I don't want to generalize. I'm sure that there are people who are 75 years old with like chronic FOMO. I don't know. But I do think that the stock in trade, like the I think that there is a time when that becomes when that holds more value, like literal value. And it just so happens that the time in one's life when that holds considerable value is also a time in your life when, at least if you've got this kind of capital, you're able to, spend a ton of time on social media. You're able to spend the money to go to these kinds of events.
And this isn't, I think about like I remember coming out of the sort of 2008 financial crisis. So like in like 2012, 2013, there were all of these articles about how millennials, there was this sort of trope of the millennial who's come back to their parents' basement. Like that's how the whole thing, the documentary starts, right? It's like you're in your parents' basement. And I think that there's a part of the reason that the reaction to this online was so much pointing and laughing was because it was either you had millennial people of this age who had lived through that and were just like, that's so not my experience, like fuck these people, or people who were like, yeah, we knew millennials were a bunch of
so
marks.
Gia Tolentino, she's a writer for New Yorker, used to be at Jezebel. She's interviewed in this documentary, and she has a lot of useful things to say, I think. But one of the things that she says early on, to your point, is a quote that I wrote down. Millennials' understanding of the world has been shaped by extreme precarity. And now people want to construct their own reality with the dream of being successful enough that you are beyond accountability. Billy McFarland is the person that is baked in that oven and comes out fully formed and does Fyre Fest. So if your general sense of being in the world is one that is framed by economic precarity, job insecurity, there is, it makes all the more appealing this fantasy of being accountable to nothing and no one, being some kind of entrepreneur through the power of marketing and ideas. Like these things that are so abstract and so ephemeral are also things that can make you a tens of millions of dollars. And so there is like, it's like the appeal to something that is the direct like opposite of what your reality actually is.
And have you ever been to a music festival?
Oh, sure.
Because like that was what's also interesting was when they put this in the history of music festivals. Because and I don't know if there's a Coachella doc, but the little bit they had in this one about Coachella's change from starting out, because I know
started off selling hot dogs. Now you can't afford it.
Because like that was I've only been to one music. I went to the second Bonnaroo.
Okay.
I didn't have enough money to go to the first Bonnaroo. All my friends went. The second Bonnaroo, but it was the same. Like the thing about that is like, and this was before I guess MTV or Viacom or somebody bought it out like years later. But you didn't. It was the pitch was the exact opposite.
Yes.
It was not come to this luxurious place. It was like, you're going to be on a farm,
right?
In a tent.
It's more like Woodstocky ethos. Before, I mean, so my version of Bonnaroo, which I never went to Bonnaroo, but and I also never went to Lollapalooza, but that's where Lollapalooza lives in my head as a cultural event, as a musical like space that is this kind of like I don't know, peace, love, and understanding or whatever.
Yeah.
But Coachella was begun in 99. Interestingly, the same year that Woodstock
99
was attempted, like that failure, that festival failure.
Which we may need to talk about that. Yeah,
we should talk about that. I mean, that's another good candidate for like a summer documentary watch. But the like Coachella was formed that same year, was initially this also very just like, come hear some good music, whatever. Now it has become its own hyper exclusive event.
Yeah.
You have to have like loads of.
There's a great episode.
You wouldn't even say gazillions, because all of this is just like imaginary money to me. None of it exists. None of it's real. It's all monopoly money. So I don't even know like what kinds of dollars to put in front of actual words, because none of it makes sense to me. But that's what you need apparently to go to Coachella now.
Yeah. I don't, man, Coachella, I just whatever.
Anyway,
I think that you're talking about aging out. I'm like, that just sounds like a lot of people.
It is. I don't think that's where you hit your extroversion limit.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it was. I lost my notes. Hold on, but the other thing I was thinking about this, having come off some of the other stuff that we've talked about, was the like in my head, I've always kind of framed like Instagram is the kind of millennial social media platform, and then TikTok and YouTube is the sort of Gen Z platform of choice.
Okay.
And I do think what's interesting is how I really started to feel that contrast as someone who started hanging out on TikTok more, where like people who are influencers on TikTok usually have to, it's even in the name, they're called, when you open that, you're a creator, right? And so the idea is that you are making a thing.
Interesting.
And the people who are most successful on TikTok are successful. They talk about being successful within a specific niche. It's not a broad appeal thing, right? But it's also often about like, you're making something, you're giving the world a thing that's a little, and then that's what kind of goes viral. In a way that Instagram was just like, here's like the running joke, like, here's take a picture of what I had for dinner. Like that's what you do on Instagram, or you're traveling.
I mean, like we have the phrase content creator now. And I do think that that idea or that work is where we talked about this with the episode on Secret Lives of Mormon Wives, that like a lot of these influencers are not taken seriously because it's just you're getting paid to be pretty or whatever, because people don't think about, and we don't really have a sense of the kind of work that goes into creating content and what makes content that people want to watch.
Right.
And that does sound very difficult to me. And so,
as we don't begrudge them. We want people to watch.
But I don't have a set, like, I enjoy, like, that my relationship to this content is very, for better or worse, like, not, like, I enjoy thinking about ideas and talking to you.
Yeah.
Right? And watching documentaries. And so then this becomes a space where I can like enjoy those things synchronously.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, maybe
whatever happens.
Whatever.
That's just icing.
So I don't, you know what I mean?
No, totally.
My enjoyment, my relationship to this content is, I mean, I think about, and so like conversationally edit perhaps in a certain kind of way, because I'm trying to think about how to translate certain ideas or whatever. But to be able to think about audience in a way that is beyond the reach, like our audiences involve a classroom, you know?
Yeah.
And that can be anywhere from like 20 people to 180 people, but it's never going to be 2 million people.
No.
It's never going to be 20 million people in one space at one time listening to what you say.
Yeah.
And that's just a different level of...
But also, like, even just the shift, I mean, I think because TikTok's become so dominant amongst Gen Z, and that's now as millennials are aging out of the target ad demographic, out of that 18 to 35 for sure, 18 to 49 eventually. The like TikTok, your follower count doesn't really matter, right? Because when the way the algorithm works, so Instagram, you pull it up and it's going to give you images of people you follow, right? TikTok, you open up to that For You page, the main page, and it's just throwing you stuff.
Okay.
Right? It might sprinkle in people you follow more.
Okay.
But the idea...
the algorithm
works differently. And it emphasizes content that people want to watch over accounts that a lot of people follow. And so it's a very different model where you can't... When I was watching, it's like, this wouldn't work on TikTok in the same way.
And so there's an interesting kind of... I don't know. So on one hand, that makes a lot of people want to try to do that because there is this very American idea of like anybody can become famous. Anybody can become big. At the same time, though, the Fyre Festival and how it got promoted and what it became as an idea, I think is a really good example of how fame begets fame, how money begets money, how insular and exclusive.
Even like, that was so funny.
All of this still is.
Aubrey McClendon.
Like, it's a very non-democratic.
Yeah, like Aubrey McClendon, the big investor, the VC investor who puts money into the credit card thing that Dylan McFarlane does, right?
Yes.
Who then gets indicted for fraud, right?
Yes.
So like...
Aubrey McClendon,
it's very interesting. McFarlane talked about him as this great entrepreneur.
Oh, sure.
But when you listen carefully, he is a
grifter.
Well, his parents were. He's the son of a rich person. Like he didn't like.
Sure.
He didn't entrepreneur his way into this.
100%.
You know, like he was born into wealth.
Our venture capitalist whistleblower truth teller, which like I'm glad that he did those things. But like that is whatever. If you like Google a little bit, like there's. I hope he's not defrauding people, but like there is generational wealth is everywhere. Everywhere, every stone you turn over, there are just like pieces of generational wealth crawling out from under it. Like, I mean, so and Billy McFarland is an interesting story in all of this because he's a kid from New Jersey who has this not rags to riches story at all, but very much this kind of there's a real narrative interest in his psychology and what makes him tick and how he thinks about this stuff and how he comes to be this thing, and such that we hear the story of him in second grade where I thought that this was the grossest story, but I think it's presented as like being kind of adorable, that like this 8-year-old is placed next to a girl he has a crush on, is what he says. And her crayon breaks. And he says to a girl he has a crush on, "I'll fix your crayon if you give me $1."
Right.
Like already out of the gate, there is not a like,
"I will fix your crayon because
I'm a nice guy," or because I have a crush on you, or because of like, it's like the way that his understanding of relationships works in relation to his understanding of personal gain is something that we see in this like little incarnation of a and then
I don't think that's a true story. I think that's all. I think he made up that story because he thinks it makes it.
I don't care if it's true or not. I know. I don't. But like then it goes on to a I realized that I could hack into like the mainframe of the school's like Wi-Fi typewriters, whatever those things were called, and like block so he changes the password. Teachers are blocked out if he is to be believed. And yes, he does have a track record of telling untruths for sure. So maybe this is complete garbage, but even if whether it's true or not, it's a really like, oh my God, if you were a second grader I don't know. Like I could see a second grader getting in a hell of a lot of trouble for doing this. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Like hacking the school's mainframe and blocking teachers from the system.
Right.
That's
to then advertise your crayon repair business.
That's really
that's
a remarkable violation.
That's why I think it's made up, because you had to say who to see to get the thing. So someone's gonna be like this, like, I know, it doesn't matter. But as a story
at all,
I think it matters, because if it's made up, it just shows more deeply that in his mind, this is somehow articulating a series of values or strengths or positive traits about himself that he would be able to do this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't make up a story about yourself and say it. And first of all, the fact that
I think either way, it's gross.
It is gross. Yeah. Yeah.
And then in like 5th grade, he has like 3 people in India working for him full time because of his whatever venture he was working on at the time. Then the one that really takes off, but not nearly to the extent that he says it does, because he has a, part of his like track record of lying is inflating, is their lies not by omission but by inflation. Like this company is worth this much money. No, it's not. This company has this many employees. No, it doesn't. But the one that does have some success is a credit card company called Magnesis that is not even it's literally a piece of it's a card that looks cool. It's made of metal.
Yeah.
And it piggybacks on on the credit card that you do have.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with like actual credit holdings.
Yes.
It's everything to do with perks that if you pay a membership fee to Magnesis, you have this metal card that looks very sleek.
Yeah.
And it gives you access to like
a townhouse, apparently.
A townhouse that then they get sued for trashing. The idea, it's a good idea, is like if you're young and in New York City, perhaps you're new to New York City, there's this colossus, and this gives you a way to plug in to, again, exclusive events.
Yeah.
That's where you can get Hamilton tickets.
Yeah.
That do exist, but it's like they don't exist in the way that he says they exist. It's like he would sell you a Hamilton ticket for some amount of money at the last minute if his employee, like this is the story one of his Magnesis employees tells, he would like go on StubHub or whatever and like buy up a ton of tickets at some crazy amount of money. And then that allows him to like give out the tickets, but then he uses that money to promise tickets to the something else. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. I don't know.
Well, it's like the whole thing is this, and I was wondering, like, because I said, like, why did he have to do this so quickly? And I think it must have had something. They didn't spell this out, or if they did, I missed it. But that like the Fyre app he had overvalued it in a variety, like when he was trying to get investors.
Yes,
he had overvalued the profits of it, and so I guess what the kind of underlying thing was, we have to do this festival to make money.
Yes.
Go back and actually prove the profits for the app that we're trying to get. So like
that makes sense.
It is this ongoing, like in some ways that model of like what he was doing with the tickets and all that.
Yeah.
It's just the same thing of like, we're always doing thing, B to pay for thing A, and then and way. And really just to kind of then skim off the top for his own lifestyle along the way. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean,
one of the things that I find, one of the things that I find fascinating, but frustrating but I don't know, all sorts of things, is the we see it come up a lot in the documentary, but it's very much a example of a much broader phenomenon, I think, to do with like the vague, so vague, such vague retic that comes out of gazillionaires with ideas.
I noticed that too.
And so whether it's like, this timeline that's just gonna happen, or his and when he himself is talking about, and this is in retrospect, so he's had time to think about what this Fyre Festival actually is. He calls it he talks about the island and the idea as a year-round creative center.
Yeah.
That would culminate in an annual festival. Hell is a creative center.
Well,
it's musicians and artists and influencers and people being rich and creative together. Cool. What's going to happen? What's the product? It's a creative center.
Right.
And it blows my mind, because I do think that, and it's part of why it all just sounds like monopoly money to me, and why I don't, again, like I kind of was, I'm coming after the phenomenon of media influencers as a thing, but it's influencers saying that like my brand is about positivity. Like,
what?
Words fail me, because I'm like, how are you? Because if you have so much money tied up in, but this is how venture capitalists work too, though, is like so much about investing, and it's about speculation.
Right.
So in so many ways, we are buying and selling and trading on ideas about the future. And there are, of course, different levels of that. Right. And so with someone, it's investing in literal markets. For someone else, it's Instagram photos and positivity. But there is still, to me, it seems like there is a common, like, undergirding logic of speculation about the future. And in that speculative world, we cannot but use vague rhetoric about, like there's very little, like, here's what we're going to do, and here is the plan. And
but I think the documentary does a good job of like showing the contrast, like between Billy McFarlane and Grant, and they're sort of like, they're cosplaying of startup guys and the other professionals around them. But there's these moments where like they run into, like they bring in the production people, and they're like, this can't happen, this is never going to work, but they're paying us, so we'll do it because you're paying us, right?
And so how much of it is cosplay, and how much of it is like, is it cosplay if people are willing to do it?
I just think people are going to do it because they expect to get paid.
But then because it doesn't work, then that's what makes the person a fraudster.
Right.
Or the what's her name? Anna
Delvey? Oh,
yes.
Yeah.
Or who was the other example that they gave?
Elizabeth Holmes.
Elizabeth Holmes from Theranos.
Yeah.
It's like, if they had put on Fyre Festival with more time, and they still didn't pay. I don't know. I guess
my point is, like, they wouldn't have put Fyre Festival on with more time, because they are not the kind of serious people who are able, like, logistics matter.
Yeah.
And there are
for
people,
sure.
People who do what Billy McFarlane was trying to do.
For sure.
Successfully and professionally all the time.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out, or put my finger on, or something, is like, yes, that's absolutely correct. And there is a reason, though, that like all of his vague language about creative centers were still able to seduce people and compel people.
I think that's where...
And that's real.
Yeah.
Like that still works in that community.
I think, so this is like a great segue, because like the other thing that jumped out to me about the documentary is the role of the media.
Yeah.
Which we keep coming back to in these documentaries. Because like, it's again, do you have a cult if you don't have, a camera pointed at it? So like on the one hand, the media is a certain kind of media that you can, so there's like all these media members in the documentary who represent kind of like serious people. And then there's this one point where they talk about, one of them says, it's not hard to get New York City business journalists to cover your, whatever. And then and someone else says, yeah, they were just reprinting press releases.
Yeah.
So there's this like role that the media plays because it's, that puffs up, right? It doesn't question.
It is a content creator
of its own.
Of course. Yeah.
And then so one wing of the media like lifts McFarlane up.
Yeah.
Gives him all, like he's on all of this cable news stuff or whatever.
Sure.
And then just so the other side of the media can come around after the fact and expose him, right?
Well, yeah,
and so there's like a way that, like, in the same way that oftentimes these, whatever these things that get called cults get lifted up by the media, and then when the whole thing falls apart, then the media is right there to film that.
Well, because the media is also its own, like, it is reporting on and thus following trends.
Right.
And talking about and so when the trends are on an upswing and doing well, then they receive positive press. And we bolster then the very people that then have like spectacular failures that then we report as inevitable because we now know that it's a failure. So it's just this one of the things that the idea that a cult needs, something called a cult needs a camera pointed at it, I think is, in our last conversation, we were talking about the idea that a cult is to do with power, not to do with religion. But of course, those two things are not easily disaggregatable because, like, because there is never like a set of discrete categories where those things operate in isolation. One of the things that I found interesting about this documentary, and why I think it works inside of that sort of conversation that we have that's ongoing, is that trajectory, that narrative arc of like, this thing could have been great. And there was this really compelling figure at the head of it who was able to sell an idea because of all of his charisma and all of his ability to appeal to identify what people wanted and needed and bring them in to have a sense of community, and then exploited them, in this like remarkable fashion. But we've talked about this before too. Nobody's ever going to make a documentary where they like call capitalism a cult, right?
Yeah.
So what we do instead, and what the role of someone who comes on to those other documentaries about, minority religious groups and has no problem saying, this is a cult because here's how cult works and blah, 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 which I have a massive problem with. The role that got played in this case, that role was played by the writer psychologist.
Yeah.
Did you note her? What did you think of that? Toward the end of the documentary, there's a psychologist who comes on to give us her description of con artists.
Yeah. No.
Did you
hear what she said?
What did she say?
She says, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but she says that they identify what you need and then they offer it to you.
Right.
Which is exactly what,
she's giving
any number one of our cult experts would say.
So they're
Not
giving
to drop names that will
they're
show up.
giving sweeping generalizations that offer a diagnostic explanation of the phenomenon at work to make it make sense. And I mean, honestly,
but that's how all advertising works, right? Like, isn't that the art
so
of all marketing?
And so I meant to, but then I didn't have time to look up. I'm looking up her name right now. I didn't have time to look up, like, did this person write a book about con artists?
Ooh.
Did she do some kind of expose wherein a psychoanalytic discussion of con artists used Billy McFarland as a case study? Like, just what is Maria Konnikova? What is the expertise that, like, okay, he's a con artist. Sure.
Yeah.
Where is, again, this like dividing line though because in other contexts, speculative language about an uncertain future and money changing hands inside of that vision is completely appropriate. It's called venture capitalism or whatever. Like, so, and I understand that like people who were owed money did not get money, and that is wrong, 100%. But also, like, there are lots of people who are multi-billionaires who owe taxes that are that it's fine because you just are, tying up the process with however you tie up the process. If you're a bit like, so I don't like, when is owing someone money criminal and when is owing someone money part of doing business because money makes money and that accrues debt and you need that in order to make more money. Like it.
No, well, there's another way to read this whole story. Like if like, there's another way to read this whole story as Wells, the whistleblowing VC guy, Calvin Wells, as like, if we think that, I mean, there's a way to read this that Aubrey McClendon, what is his name? McClendon was actually conning Billy McFarland.
Sure.
And then the difference being that McClendon has family wealth to fall back on.
Well, and I'm not,
so there's a way to read this as a new money, old money thing, in which Wells, as this sort of old money VC, making sure that from my perspective, in which it's all a con, the laws are written to allow some people to declare bankruptcy in this situation and not others.
Sure.
Then that's the other way, is like, no, actually there's McFarland just lacked the privilege necessary to take advantage of people that Wells and other people enjoy.
Maybe. Right?
I
mean, Wells ultimately gets indicted as well.
Really?
And stuff. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, no. Oh, God.
No,
I was thinking we were talking about McClendon still.
McClendon
in my
gets
head,
indicted.
I was having a train of thought that was running.
Yeah.
Out of the station, obviously, while you were talking, and I was still on McClendon. McClendon gets indicted.
Yeah.
Again, I hope Wells isn't defrauding people. Like, not that I know of. But like, I guess it's not to say, as ever, like, I absolutely think that McFarland should, like, he committed wire fraud and then lied about it and then lied to a law enforcement officer about it and continues to participate in ventures post, like, he's out of jail now. He served 4 years. He was sentenced to 6. He served 4.
Yeah.
While he was in prison, he like started a venture with a dude who then sued him after the fact because he didn't get, like, and as of, I don't know, there was supposed to be like a Fyre Festival 2 that he was launching, and
this guy just needs to, like,
but then as of like,
truck and
like literally last month, the Fyre brand was for sale. I don't know if it ever got bought or like what the status of that is, but like there is it isn't that like it's, I don't know. I just think that inside of a structure where speculation is its own, like it's the coin of the realm.
Yeah.
And so inside of that space, like I'm interested in where the boundaries are, like around when that becomes real. And when the exploitation becomes a real thing.
Yeah.
And when it becomes like a future prognostication.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't know that I have like, I'm so far away from that world that like I don't have a lot of insight or strong opinions about it, except that the fact that people can become people who make inordinate amounts of wealth as part of, to come back to what you were saying earlier, inside of the same generation that is characterized by economic precarity.
Right.
Is its own like interesting thing to, and I think important thing to note.
Yeah.
Which is also my takeaway. If I can, I'm just going to give my takeaway.
Let me just say, Maria Konnikova wrote a book, The Confidence Game.
Hey.
Why We Fall for It Every Time.
There we go. Is there a chapter on Billy McFarland?
No, it came out in 2016. So it was out before this happened.
Okay.
And then, but she's also a professional poker player.
And I mean, I'm sure that there are lots of important insights that she had. Like, so I'm not trying to like say that anybody who has anything to say about cults or con artists or whatever, or just, again, like the identifications that we make and the classifications that we make, I think are part of this whole process that needs attending to. And I think that that's also where, this is like my little moment of being an academic, for the day, at least in a more overt way, is that I think that Pierre Bourdieu's concept of habitus could be useful here. Like,
who is Pierre Bourdieu?
Well,
for my Aunt Donna,
a sociologist and theorist who had a lot to say about modes of social formation. So we are always forming our social worlds. We're always, like building up a society, but we are also as selves being built by those worlds. And so there is this Mobius strip of social formation that is happening, rather than like, I am over here, I am making this thing, or this thing pre-exists and so it makes that. It's this constant interaction and intra-action. And so our sense of being, our own sense of being, like this is the, millennial who spends over 2 hours on social media. And so I have a certain kind of FOMO. And so my own identity is wrapped up in what I'm taking part in or missing out on. Like our own sense of individual being inside of that co-constitutive process of building and being built by is informed by our tastes and our sensibilities and our norms and our values and all of those things. But all of that is necessarily framed, in Bourdieu's rendering anyway, by economic status and a kind of economic situation, context that we are built into. And it's not to say that there is never any reality in which someone breaks free of that or goes into a totally different economic stratosphere. Of course there are.
Right.
But those are exceptions that prove a certain kind of social rule. Yeah. And I just think that that's important to think about, that as a structure and as a process is something that can help give us language to these really tangled phenomena.
No, that makes a lot of sense. I think like to some extent, I think the economics of this are like, it's easy. Like the FEMA tents and the cheese sandwiches can hide, like, I think, sort of what's happening at the level of kind of economic status and class in all of this, in terms of both. Because one thing that's interesting to think, like, all of those influencers who were there posted about it all over the place and got all this engagement from the experience.
Yeah.
And so, and to the point that then people who were too poor to be conned felt left out, that they didn't get conned. Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a whole thing of like, well, we were there. I experienced this, like, because it became this national thing all over the place. Even in its failure, it succeeded as being an exclusive experience that we're making documentaries about and talking about. Like,
I now you have a story to tell about having been there, and I'm genuinely sorry for anybody's miserable experience with anything. I don't find the kind of, like, you know, the Schadenfreude glee at like rejoicing at their misery. I think that is its own process that reflects a lot of these dynamics that are worth thinking about.
Yeah.
Anyway, what's your takeaway?
I have two things. First one is, we've been working on this, like, one of the open questions I think that we're always coming back to, and here we are, like, what, 30 episodes in, is the kind of, like, rise of these, or the reinvigoration of the cult documentary in a kind of post 2016 world. And I think this as a kind of, there's an ongoing discourse about, like, what is the larger social trend that a number of things are taking part in politically and socially from 2015 to post COVID. And one is cults, one is conspiracy theories, and one is con men. And so I think this is a piece of that larger set of documentaries that are investigating, that are always, and they're a little
inside of a true crime
universe. And these are kind of there are moments where they are explicit about connecting it to the 2016 election in this documentary. But overall, like, in this, I think it fits that larger set of questions that come up, or that larger set of issues around conspiracy theories, cults, and con men, that I think kind of typifies that. So like the part of me that is kind of media history part of my head is kind of was like thinking about it in those terms. But more to your Bourdieu point is, like, I think I said this when we watched the McMahon documentary, like, there's a lot of scholars who now got interested in this idea of kayfabe, the fictional world of pro wrestling, the lies, the deception that's built into pro wrestling. And somebody sent me yesterday a whole thing about how we're now living in a time of economic kayfabe. So this is now popping up all over the place. And I think it's always important, like, kayfabe was a business strategy, right? And I think here you see it again. Like, it's not like the deception is always there because it's good for business. And I also wonder to what extent, you know, so if we think about how much of Fyre Fest was a kind of work, this sort of fake world that was set up to lure people in, or the generic fantasia, the ways that Billy kind of worked himself into a shoot, like, he begins. That was my reading, and not to psychoanalyze him based on one interview and a documentary, but the ways that I think the way to be a really good con man is to believe your own con. Like, you can't. There's a moment where you have to give yourself over to it. And then on top of that, and I've talked about the Onion Guy's idea of the gimmick. Her whole definition of gimmick as a kind of capital aesthetic form is that it is this thing that it's ambivalent between something that works too hard and something that works too little. And you kind of see both sides of that in terms of influencers who seem to do they are making money off their identity. It seems like they're just making money off of their existence. But then when you peel that back, there's also all of this work of deal making and, like, yes, $250,000 for an Instagram post, but what goes into that deal, right? And so there's that, that element. So there's a lot of these things that I think are not just confined to this example of a total fraud.
Yeah.
But that are just, like we said, kind of ways to mark different parts of the way late capitalism kind of works.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, this is a conversation for later. So, we'll use this as a pin and you and I can take it up later. But like it's interesting too, though, like how, something like kayfabe or something like, performance that makes us think about interesting questions to do with authenticity or whatever, it can become its own a Fantasia world that is cool to think about, and also, but like in this case too, I forget who it was, maybe Calvin Wells was talking about like the power of marketing to sell an idea, but how that sort of performance or that sort of veneer is still very much a thing that can do real harm.
Yes.
And so well, okay. That's I don't know. I've got lots of thoughts about that. So I'm gonna
maybe we need to find an example of that side of it. I mean, I guess this is part of it.
McMahon.
Well, yeah.
Like, I mean, I guess that's part of the thing, is that like that story was still able to be told as like this kooky guy.
Right.
And while a lot of the, allegations that were brought up were named, there's still this like he and his misdeeds are separate from this wondrous world of artifice and performance and costumes and imagination and whatever. And I'm like, I don't know, man. I think that these things are always, it's not that one thing is necessarily going to lead to whatever. But I also don't think that it's very productive to siphon them out and separate them as if they are completely
the reason it took so long for anyone to actually do anything about all the variety of allegations against McMahon were because the media was like, oh, that's just that fake wrestling stuff.
Exactly.
So the kayfabe hid it away.
Okay.
What's your
my favorite?
What's your
it is a movie.
So fancy.
Have you watched it?
No, I just reading it on the notes. I'm like, this
high
is
recommend. High recommend. This is a Ruben Östlund joint, Swedish filmmaker who has done a lot of interesting things. But I want to recommend the movie Triangle of Sadness. It's from 2022. I'm sure that it's streamable. I don't know where it's streamable, but I saw it on Canopy.
Okay.
And so it's a really smart examination of wealth and privilege and access and the social treatment that comes in tow. He has really useful stuff to say about like beauty as currency, and social capital as literal capital, like those, social capital as like a thing that is distinguished from economic capital is kind of a fuzzy and blurry line.
Yeah.
And so this model and his influencer girlfriend are, like given a yacht, like time on this exclusive, amazing yacht, captained by Woody Harrelson, who is it's great. There are so many good scenes and moments, but an early one that's particularly relevant is a staff director on the yacht is like holding a meeting before the passengers come on, and she's like hyping everybody up, and there is this like most important rule is to never say no. You never say no to anyone. And so when someone comes up to Woody Harrelson and is like, I've noticed that the sails are dirty, and do you think you could clean the sails? He's like, this is a motorized vessel. We do not have sails. She's like, didn't we see sails and whatever? And it ends up like, I will I will have them cleaned. Someone who wants a staff worker to like go swimming, but she's on her shift and she's like, I don't want to. Okay. Like, be in the moment. Anyway, it goes into all sorts of interesting places. It's a long movie. It's like 2.5 hours long, but it's very well done. It's very interesting. And the end of it, so it's not just like, we have this, like with the White Lotus franchise.
I was thinking of this in the back of my head.
Right.
Yeah. I've not watched the new White Lotus.
One of the things, though, that I really like about this movie is that the end implicates its viewer in a really direct way, in ways that White Lotus, maybe we have like moments where we're able to kind of like see ourselves reflected back and like, oh, maybe we should think about the way that we, whatever. This is a very direct.
We realize that we're complicit.
Oh,
it wouldn't be an episode if we didn't use that phrase.
You have to, like, the ending is not a tidy narrative that tells you what happens. Like, you kind of, I don't think that that's too much of a spoiler. You kind of, it is up to your own narrative ethos.
Yeah. Interesting.
What happens in the film.
There are two places in my life where I was being trained and told to never say no. Like in the same similar kind of way.
I don't love it.
No, I know. Looking back, one was Starbucks.
Okay.
You're supposed to always reply with like what you can do, not what you can't do.
Sure.
So it's like, and the other was the training for volunteers at the mega church. Like, how do you, when visitors come in and ask for something, never say, So there you go. Do with that what you will.
I will. Thank you.
My cult favorite is a series of TikTok videos called The Group Chat.
Okay.
They're made by Sydney Joe, at that girl Sid Joe, and she plays every character. There must be 6.
Okay.
She plays every character in a series of TikToks. They're each a couple minutes long.
All right.
And they build on each other. And it's this sort of serialized story of each of these characters texting back and forth in a group chat. So there's like 2 roommates, and then another set of roommates, and then various other young women in this group. And she plays all the parts. And they are, she now has 2 seasons of these. The first one is about a girls only dinner where one of the girls tries to bring her boyfriend.
Okay.
But it starts with that as like the initial conflict, and then becomes much bigger and more interesting, and all of these things unfold. And like, I was like, when I first saw it, I was like, this has to be twins, or because they all look similar, but she does her hair different and does these different outfits and things. And then season 2 is about a bachelorette party trip, which is ongoing. And like, it's such a great piece of like storytelling, such
content
a great
creation.
Yeah,
it's
but
hard
it's like,
work.
It's more than that, though.
Look, but I'm not docking it. I'm saying that, like, content creation is
and like
a thing to do,
right? And it all builds, and it was just such a unique way to use the medium. And if you go to her page, she has it all in like one playlist, and you can literally just hit start the first one; it'll automatically go through all of them.
Right.
And I had been seeing them in bits and pieces, and then the other night, we just watched all of them in a row, and it takes like, there's not long. It takes like 25-30 minutes, but it's just a remarkable example of like storytelling across a medium. So serialized, it's serialized storytelling. So go find that, watch it. I'm curious to see
I don't have a TikTok.
Yeah.
This is how I bring it full circle. Too.
Yeah. Well, we have a TikTok account.
We do. So I guess I have TikTok by proxy.
You're on TikTok, whether or not
I know it or not.
Yeah.
That tracks.
So, all right. Thanks for listening to Cult Favorites.
This was fun. Happy summer, Mike.
Yes. Summer. Well, what's today? Thursday is the last day of school. So 2 more days.
All right.
Children are out of school.
Okay.
But yeah, we mentioned the TikTok. Find us on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube at Cult Favorite Pod. Special thanks to the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Alabama. And we'll see y'all in a couple weeks.
Next time.
Happy summer.